Around the world, there are 22 million, some say 100 million persons who crawl on the ground. They are human beings like we are. They have the same hopes and dreams. They have the same potentials, the same abilities, but they're bound down by their lack of mobility. They're scuttling around on the ground like crabs. I like that term. They're scuttling around on the ground like crab. And he said they need to get up off the ground and be productive. Just because a person stepped on a landmine, lost their legs in a war, got polio or diabetes or whatever, and lost the function of their legs, should not mean that they are forever entrapped by immobility. It's a justice issue. And with Pet Project, our goal is that every human being should have the mobility that's appropriate to their situation. A hand-cranked wheelchair, three-wheeled, that has hauling capacity and is sturdily built so it can go on the roads where an ordinary wheelchair won't go. Is transportation one of the keys to being a human being? I never thought about that, but I think it is. I think it is. One of the keys to being a human being is freedom, and transportation is freedom. One of the keys to being a human being is to be a part of a enlarged society, and transportation is a key to that. One man also in Georgia was taking a pet into his bedroom. He was immobile, his wife could not move him about, and when he rode the pet out of his bedroom, he said, "This is the first time I've seen the sun for 3 years." How tragic that our sisters and brothers have to live like that for the simple lack of a little machine like this. We can change their world. I was in Nicaragua, rural Nicaragua, riding in a Jeep behind one of our doctors there. A woman came out and knowing it was the doctor's Jeep and flagged him down. She had a little baby in her arms. I stayed in our Jeep. The doctor spent some time with the mother and child, and then before he left, he came back and reported, he said, that child would have died if she had not stopped me. It was vomiting up worms. Parasites are so prevalent among the poor who have no medicine, whose children go barefoot where animals have been, and where sanitation is not what it could be if they had better facilities and more water. Then he pointed his finger at me and said, "Mel, you go home and bring and send back some shoes for these children." Because, as I mentioned, when children walk on infected soil with cracks between their toes or little injuries, they pick up the worm eggs and become infected, and they do in other ways. So I came home, spread the word among my contacts, and I have a lot, and we have sent probably 20, 25,000, 30,000 pair of shoes to Nicaragua. I was there a couple months ago in one of the centers and felt a tug on my trouser leg. I looked down and there was a beautiful little dark-haired, dark-eyed girl, about 4 or 5. And she said to me, "Senor, look at my new shoes." And she lifted up her little trouser legs and walked across the floor, and these shoes were the kind that sparkle when she walked. Her eyes sparkled and her shoes sparkled, and that's a story I'll never forget. All the work I've ever done to help the poor was worth it in the sparkling eyes of that beautiful little girl. "Senor, look at my new shoes." How proud she was. The disparity of wealth with a few, very few really, in every country, including the United States, with a few owning so much and so many having so little. Overseas, it's even worse in some countries. And could be so easily solved. I cannot understand greed. I guess I can understand access to land is so basic. Access to good land is so basic. When I began to work in Latin America, I discovered that in Central America, especially, the good land had been bought by American fruit companies to grow bananas and pineapples, etc., for market up here. The poor were left with the poor land, which is so typical. And it's true around the world. Poor governments have done disastrous things. Zimbabwe today is an example, one of many. There are produced today 3,000 calories of food for every human being in the world. But so many human beings aren't getting their share. That's unjust and a tragedy. The right to ample food should be a human right. And the right to produce that by one's own labor should be parallel to it. But people have to have resources, including soil, land, to do that. I find such joy in giving and doing, and feel so sorry for retired persons that I see out chasing a golf ball over some grass, or driving $100,000 recreational vehicles across the country, spending their time in frivolous things and calling it fun. I wish somehow they could all discover the joy of using their resources in their latter years, resources of knowledge, skill, wisdom, understanding, contacts, and money, to help those who have not been so fortunate. My generation has been greatly blessed. We started out with nothing, but because of hard work, thrifty living, inflation, and inheritance, we've ended up really very wealthy as you compare us to the rest of the world. And what we do with that wealth as we write our wills and leave this life is a reflection of the status and the state of our soul. A person's checkbook tells more about their spiritual life than their church attendance. I believe that firmly. There are many stories, but one that I retell often is about a gentleman in the Republic of Georgia who had been without leg mobility for some time, was a very impatient man, was fighting it but couldn't do anything about it. He received a pet, and about a month later wrote a letter which said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. I was a miser, and now I'm a man. I hadn't smiled for years, and now look at me, I'm smiling." That exemplifies the difference that a pet makes. He was a miser, now he's a man. Hadn't smiled, now he's smiling.